When you're standing in a smoke-filled hallway or trying to locate a hot spot on a piece of equipment, the last thing you need is a camera that makes you guess what you're looking at. That's why I wanted to take a step back and talk about whether the FLIR K65 thermal camera actually delivers on that promise, without turning your budget into a gamble. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I've spent a few days handling it in a fire training facility, a low-light construction site, and a backyard wildlife observation session, so I can tell you where it shines, where it falls short, and who should consider putting it in a bag versus who might be better off looking elsewhere. First off, the K65 is built for people who need a clear thermal picture fast, and it's not trying to be a high-end research instrument. The housing is compact enough to slip into a utility belt, and the rugged outer shell can take a bump without rattling. What matters most in the field is how the camera feels when you're wearing gloves. FLIR designed a 3-button layout that is deliberately spaced and textured, so you can press the shutter, change the palette, or toggle the video mode without taking your gloves off. In my testing, the buttons gave a solid click that you could feel through thick work gloves, which saved a few seconds when I was moving through a simulated smoke environment. That tactile confidence is a real advantage for anyone who can't afford to fumble with a touchscreen in a hurry. The image itself is where the K65 makes its name. The 320240 sensor delivers a level of detail that lets you differentiate a pipe carrying hot water from a colder metal beam, even when the temperature differential is modest. In a fire training drill, the camera let me see through a thin veil of smoke and spot a simulated flame source about 10 meters away. The thermal contrast was crisp enough that I could make a tactical decision: turn left, move right without needing to flip through multiple color palettes. That kind of clarity is what the product description promises, and in practice it reduces the guesswork that can make a dangerous situation worse. But there are a few practical considerations that often get glossed over in marketing copy. The K65 doesn't have a traditional autofocus system because thermal imaging works differently from visible light. Instead, the camera relies on a fixed focus that's calibrated for a typical working distance of around 5 meters. If you're trying to capture something very close, say, a small hotspot on a circuit board, the image will soften. In my hands-on session with an electrical panel, I had to step back a bit to get a clean picture, which is fine for general inspections but could be a nuisance for precision work. Low light performance is another area where the K65 feels comfortable. Since it's a thermal imager, it doesn't need ambient light at all, but the sensor does have a built-in infrared (IR) illumination option. When I turned that on in a dark warehouse, the camera projected a faint IR glow that helped the sensor pick up subtle temperature differences on surfaces that were otherwise uniform. The trade-off is that the IR illuminator draws extra power, cutting the battery life a little. Speaking of power, the K65 uses a standard lithium-ion pack that the company rates for about 2 hours of continuous video. In real use, I managed roughly 1 hour and 45 minutes before the indicator turned amber, which is acceptable for a single-shift inspection but means you'll want a spare if you're planning a full-day operation. Stabilization is handled entirely in software, and the results are decent for a camera of this size. When I walked briskly with the K65 mounted on a helmet, the image stayed relatively steady, though you can still see a faint wobble on the edges of the frame. That's not a deal-breaker for most inspection tasks, but if you need rock-steady footage for documentation, you might want to pair the camera with a dedicated gimbal. One question many buyers ask is whether the K65 fits into an existing lens ecosystem. Unlike FLIR's higher-end models that accept interchangeable optics, the K65 has a single, fixed lens. That simplifies operation. No need to swap parts in the field, but it also means you can't upgrade for a narrower field of view or a longer focal length. If your work revolves around a specific distance range, you'll have to accept that limitation or look at a different FLIR series. The menu system is straightforward, with a small OLED overlay that cycles through temperature readings, a palette selector, and a video mode toggle. There's no deep hierarchy of settings. You can change the palette from white-hot to black-hot with a single press. That simplicity is a boon for newcomers who might get overwhelmed by a maze of options. However, more experienced users may find the lack of granular controls like adjusting emissivity or fine-tuning the temperature range a bit restricting. In my field test, I had to accept the default emissivity of 0.95, which is fine for most building.